But concussion prevention, can we actually prevent the concussion? Maybe not. Or can we, what I think we're going to look more at, what I'm going to talk more about, is what can we do to prevent the damage once a head impact has occurred? Because a head impact is going to occur. People are going to fall. Car accidents will happen. Sports will continue to be played. And that's, I think, a good thing. I'm not pro banning sports. I'm pro concussion awareness, less stigma, adequate treatment, not rest until your symptoms go away, but like actual management of concussion. And I think that to some degree rule changes can help, delaying the age based on, like hockey has continually delayed the age when they introduce body checking, and I think that's cool. As kids will develop at crazy rates. A kid born in December is going to be a lot smaller than a kid born in January when they're playing in the same season and they're like 13, 12, 11, 9, right? So I think some things like that are kind of the big primary things that we can do. But as far as like secondary, tertiary prevention, I'm going to talk a little bit about helmets. I'm going to talk a little bit about neck strength. And then my little taglines: nutrition, movement, mindset. I've got some props. I've got some supplements that I recommend. Got the helmet. But basically, yeah, let's start off with helmets. Helmets, I hate to break it to you, helmets do not prevent concussions. Can't really see it here. Doesn't look like much, but this little like divot, that was from me flying face first into the riser after a guy hit me from behind. And when I got up, the play was already on the other side of the ice, and I had no idea how to get to the bench. So helmets don't prevent concussions. So this hard exterior is not a lot different than your hard exterior. And I've got this animation that I show where this guy is holding a skull, and he hits it, and the brain kind of wiggles inside. And that is true whether you're wearing a helmet or not. Helmets prevent more severe traumatic brain injuries. They prevent the fractures, the lacerations. This acts as like a second skull, but it doesn't change the fluid dynamics inside, right? And I know fluid dynamics is not the appropriate way to talk about it. One other thing to consider is that helmets are really good for linear accelerations, like front to back smashing, but they don't do so much for the rotational, torsional component. And so some research says, hey, helmets actually do, there's a dog here. Some research, like biomechanical research, actually says like helmets do a great job of like heavy impacts, but they don't do so much for the light impacts, right? These things are tested under certain G's of force, under certain levels of force. Good morning. And if you're below that level of force, it doesn't actually absorb. It doesn't actually diffuse the force the way that it would diffuse a heavy force, preventing a severe traumatic brain injury. So this light force actually doesn't get absorbed, gives you a little rotational component, and actually may drive the risk more towards concussion. So I'm not saying helmets cause concussion. I'm saying they don't prevent concussion. You should still definitely wear a helmet. You do not want broken skulls. You don't want lacerations. But don't wear a helmet thinking it's preventing concussion. It's preventing things far worse than concussion. Mouth guards and headbands in soccer, and mouth guards in other sports, same bucket. They don't really prevent concussion so much as they prevent dental injuries and bigger kind of breaky kind of injuries. So that's helmets. Wear helmets, but not because of concussions. They don't prevent concussions. Moving on to neck strength. So the reason we talk about the neck and the cervical spine and concussion is if you've watched my other videos, you've got to get hit at like 70 to 120 G's of force, 160, 80 to 160, some research says, to sustain a concussion. To get whiplash, you only need about 5 G's of force. So your neck sustains injury a lot sooner than your brain will, at linear accelerations of like 5 G's versus 80 to 160. And there was this study that came out that said, hey, for every pound increase of strength, so for every pound my neck gets stronger, I've got a percent, and I don't remember the percentage, but I've got like for every pound increase, there's a percent decrease in concussion risk. And so everyone went with that. And there's really cool products like the Iron Neck, which is this cool, crazy helmet that you can do like full range of motion with graded resistance, which is pretty cool. But the big thing is actually reactivity. You got a question here. Do helmets absorb some of the shock from a hit, like getting your head hit on a door? Also, helmets that absorb rotational force. So that's what I had mentioned. If you popped in late, so most helmets currently are designed for linear acceleration force, and they will absorb a shock that is greater than a minimum, but not more than a maximum before it would break, right? So there's this range of force, and it tends to be pretty high because these helmets are really good at preventing severe traumatic brain injuries, fractures, subdural hematomas, things like that, but not so much rotational force. There is research and there are companies trying to work on helmets that have some rotational give to kind of absorb the rotational force. But right now the technology is just not there. So helmets aren't preventing concussions from, like, say, the shock of hitting your head on a door. Depending on how hard you go to hit that, it's not going to minimize your risk of concussion. It's minimizing your risk of more severe things. In rotational force, it seems like the technology might be heading that direction. So back to neck strength. For every pound increase, the study said for every pound increase, you get a % decrease of concussion risk. And so everyone went with that. And there is some merit to just having some bulk and some mass to you. But the big thing that a lot of research is saying is it comes down to your reactivity. You're welcome. It comes down to your reactivity. So being prepared for the hit, being prepared for the impact so you can actually brace. And some of the ways they'll do this is they'll put non-concussion level weights, and they'll have subjects kind of sit with helmets on so that they're not cracking their skulls, and they'll just drop a weight, but they won't tell them when they're dropping. So they'll say, hey, we're going to drop it, and they drop it, and they brace. And then later they'll be like, we're going to drop it, they don't drop it. We're not going to drop it, they drop it. They just kind of trick the person into, like, they don't know when they're going to get hit, and they see who reacts quicker. So they've got like electrodes and things basically testing the muscle reactivity, and the people who react quicker have less of an impact. And that's continually being repeated. So it tends to be the greater the reaction time, the greater the ability to recruit muscles and not fatigue in the third period or the fourth quarter tends to benefit you more so than the strength itself. And that actually is really important. So when we're talking about reactivity, concussion reaction times, so people who are not testing for it at baseline or not testing for it with return to play, your reaction time after a concussion can be delayed for up to almost 2 months. So if you're not going through an actual return to play or returning to sport flow that incorporates neurocognitive testing, symptom testing, but then also this physical performance testing of things like reaction time and eye movements and different things that you need to navigate the real world. Decrease reaction time for 2 months and you're playing a month and a half after your concussion, you want to make sure that reactivity is back, right? So moving on to nutrition, movement, mindset. So nutrition is really cool. This is moving on to, so the first two we talked about, helmets and neck strength, were more in the moment. What can you do to prevent a concussion? Helmets and mouth guards don't do a whole lot. You should still wear a helmet because it prevents the bigger issues, the severe, the moderate TBIs. And then reaction time and neck reactivity and neck strength. Yes, you totally can train reaction time. Sorry, there was a question popped up. Can you train reaction time? So with respect to the neck reactivity, I will talk about in a little bit in the movement section about vision training and some of the research that Dr. Clark did at the University of Cincinnati with his football players, and I believe maybe some basketball players. But I know for sure the football because I was at the conference where he presented it. And yeah, so they were able to increase reaction time and peripheral vision and things like that. So we'll get there in a second. Hang tight. So nutrition, preventing concussion in the moment, helmets, not so much. Reactivity of the neck and neck strength, probably. That's pretty cool. Moving on to sort of the nutrition, movement, and mindset of preventing the damage. So you did get the hit, right? Bummer, it happens. You did get the hit. How do we guarantee that you're one of the people that recovers in 22 days, 21 days, 25 days, and not 60 days, 3 months, 2 years, right? How do we make sure that you come back, you can play the sport, you can finish the season, you can go back to work, you can enjoy your family and your life. As far as nutrition goes, one of the things that we want to do, or one of the things that we look at, is how can we mitigate. There's the three big things that happen in concussion. Go back to the previous videos if you're unclear on this, but there's this functional stretching and shearing. There's an excitotoxic inflammatory event. And then there's an energy deficit. And so one of the things we can try to do is proactively make sure that we can mitigate the inflammation, we can mitigate the energy deficit, and we can provide structural support for the brain just real time, right? And so going down the list, some research shows fish oil. So this is one of the fish oils that I recommend. I do prefer liquid over capsules because it's easier to get an adequate dose without swallowing handfuls of pills. But fish oil, so omega-3s, your EPA and your DHA, eicosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid. But your brain is a lot of fat, and a lot of that fat is actually DHA. Fish oil is anti-inflammatory. Some research shows promotes neuroplasticity, minimizes neuronal cell death. So having adequate omega-3 levels is really important. And if you go back to some older posts, we'll see that when you look at the omega-3 index, so measuring omega-3s versus other inflammatory fats like arachidonic acid in the cell membrane, NCAA athletes, I think all of them, I think it's like 80%, 90% of NCAA athletes do not have adequate omega-3 index levels, which kind of is a low-hanging fruit. Like getting notifications. Boost omega-3 levels, get that omega-3 index normal or healthy, optimal. I hate the word optimal. That might be another post, but get these healthy, and we see mitigated damage in animal models, usually mice studies. So omega-3s, sorry, I got a list here so I don't miss them. Omega-3 is really cool from an inflammatory and from a neuronal structure standpoint, providing the DHA for the brain, providing this anti-inflammatory balance within the cell membrane, promoting neuroplasticity is just kind of cool in general. Next on the list, one of my favorite supplements recently is creatine, actually, creatine. So creatine, this is one that I use, Crealkaline Pro. Crealkaline's it's like a buffered creatine monohydrate. If you're going to get just a creatine from Whole Foods, Sprouts, GNC, make sure that it's just creatine monohydrate. There's nothing extra fancy flavors, colors. You just need creatine monohydrate. The reason creatine is involved in a one-step reaction. It's like two steps, but one-step reaction to rephosphorylate ATP so that ATP is the energy currency of the body. So the ATP can do its thing, right? When we have a concussion, we have that energy deficit, and we don't have great blood sugar regulation. We don't have great, or not regulation, but we don't have great metabolism in the brain because we've also got this decreased blood flow. So creatine is a really easy way to post-concussion mitigate the energy deficit. But we've also got research that things like cognitive stress, physical stress, just being an athlete or being a parent or being a human in 2020 can deplete brain creatine levels. And so that we see that if you think about it like a cup, if your cup is already empty and then you take a concussion and you need to use more fluid from the cup, you don't have it. So one thing that we see is you can actually kind of boost brain creatine levels. So post-concussion, they don't drop as low, and you don't deal with as many of the energy deficits that symptoms like brain fog and cognitive fatigue, things like that. So omega-3 is creatine. The other really cool studied one is vitamin D. I prefer, again, drops because it's easier than taking a bunch of pills. 2 drops of this would give you 4,000 IUs. This is some high potency hypo-emulsi D. You can also take, I usually recommend folks take vitamin D with K2. Helps with calcium regulation, things like that. But what we know about concussion is folks who are vitamin D deficient, which is a lot of people. Vitamin D deficiency pre-concussion leads to typically greater risk of post-concussion syndrome after concussion or persistent post-concussion symptoms. So making sure you have adequate vitamin D levels. I do not recommend getting a high potent vitamin D like this and just crushing it. It is good to know what your levels are. Folks in the conventional realm just say anything above 30. Folks in sort of the naturopathic functional realm say somewhere between 60 and 80. So you want to make sure your levels are for sure above 30. I usually don't like seeing them too much above 80, but I like right in the 60 to 80, right around 70. So that's that. Where did I go here? So that was vitamin D. And then I got two more. Curcumin and magnesium. So curcumin, if you don't talk about it as a naturopathic or functional provider, it seems to be taboo because curcumin is used for everything. But again, very anti-inflammatory, can mitigate some of that inflammatory damage. And again, taken proactively has done good things to minimize post-concussion damage. Magnesium is one of my favorite supplements just across the board. This is a really cool brand out of here in Scottsdale, actually, Jigsaw Health. Again, I don't get any, I'm not like affiliated with any of these companies. But magnesium, almost everyone is deficient. Just almost everyone's deficient. Magnesium acts as, so within that excitotoxic cascade, you got glutamate flying everywhere, and it binds NMDA receptors that allow calcium to flood mitochondria and to flood neurons to release more glutamate, and it's kind of this cycle. Magnesium actually acts as a plug right in the middle. So like if this was magnesium, it acts as a plug in the middle, and when it's gone, calcium can flow through, but when it's there, it actually kind of regulates excitotoxicity. What kind of magnesium? So if you're looking for magnesium for the brain, you want a magnesium that's going to cross the blood-brain barrier. Right now, the research shows magnesium 3 and 8. So magnesium L-threonate, 3 and 8, that is the one for the brain. Glycinate is kind of cool because it's calming because of the glycine component. Malate is more for the muscles. Citrate's a pretty bioavailable one. That's the one you'll find in like calm magnesium. And then the oxides, or I believe it's mag oxide, is more like the laxative type of magnesium. Any type of like, you can get like Trimag, I think Yarrow, Jarrow, however you say it, has a Trimag supplement. If you're looking specifically to just like boost the brain, that's all you're worried about, mag 3 and 8, but really any magnesium. Eating dark green leafy veggies, eating nuts and seeds, eating things with magnesium is obviously the first bet. But again, mag is a safe supplement that a lot of people are deficient in. This mag SRT is a malate form of magnesium. So I hope that answered and didn't confuse you more. 3 and 8 for the brain, malate for muscles, glycinate for stress, citrate just if you want a magnesium supplement. And that is that for the supplements. So yeah, for prophylactic supplements, prophylactic pre-concussion, minimize the damage if you have a concussion, we've got fish oil, we've got vitamin D, we've got turmeric, we've got creatine, and we've got magnesium. And all of those have pretty good evidence, not like stellar evidence, but pretty decent evidence in animal studies, and the crossover to humans is probably likely, and none of these supplements are really harmful. So that's kind of cool. The other thing that I like to think about is decreasing gut inflammation proactively. So if you've got things like food intolerances or dysbiosis, you're dealing with constipation, diarrhea anyway. We know the gut-brain axis is huge in post-concussion syndrome, so just making sure that your gut is in check prior to a season or just in general, if you're high risk or you're post-concussion or you're worried about concussion, getting your gut in check is pretty cool. So now onto the movement. If you're still here asking about reaction time, so one of the things you can do is proprioceptive vision and reaction training. So making sure that you know where you are in space so you're not bumping into things, which sounds really simple, but knowing where you are in space, minimizing fall risk, and then as an athlete, just knowing proprioceptively where you are relative to other players, to your position, to the net, to the offsides, to whatever, so that you're solid in space and you can react properly. So what Dr. Clark did, I want to say Joseph Clark, but Dr. Clark, University of Cincinnati, implemented vision training. So what that looked like was he would have athletes in front of like big monitors, and so there's Dynavision monitors, there's FitLight, these are all companies. So Dynavision, FitLight, Synaptech, there's a bunch of cool companies that do like reaction time things. So you're in front of a screen and it'll be like only touch the green lights, and there's a bunch of lights popping up, and you just got to be as fast as you can, but you can only look at the center of the screen. So it's improving peripheral vision, it's improving reaction time. They've got special glasses that will strobe, so like they'll just black out for a second and then black in, black out, black in, black out, and you can do it at different frequencies while you're throwing footballs, while you're passing, while you're doing all these different things. What was really crazy is I was at this conference, and he shows a slide, and he goes, the next slide will be on the screen for a blip of a second. You're gonna tell me everything you can see. Daniel Carcillo, former NHL player, is sitting like across the row, and he's sitting, it's a room full of like neuro geeks and doctors, and Dan Carcillo is there. And the screen shows for a blip of a second. Everyone goes, "What did you see?" And we were all like, "It was a football play." What colors were the jerseys? And I was like, green. A couple of people couldn't see it. Carcillo was like, green, red. That guy was number 17. That guy was this. That guy was this. He saw everything, and it was so quick. So these pro athletes are on a different level, but you can actually train that with vision training, with reaction training. And the cool thing about that is when Joseph, I keep saying Joseph, I don't know if it's Joseph, I know his last name is Clark. When Dr. Clark implemented this, he was the chief neuroscientist for their team. When he implemented that, they saw that hits didn't go down, sacks didn't go down, tackles, like all that stuff stayed the same, but concussions plummeted because their reaction time and their ability to brace and their ability to position themselves to not take a clobbering hit improved. New management came in, they cut the vision training, concussions went back up. They go, "Oh, we don't like that." They implemented the vision training, concussions went back down. So it's pretty cool stuff. There's some published data on doing vision training in ice hockey and ice hockey players, and scoring went up. It was really cool. So could you say the name of the companies again, please? Yeah, so the more commercial ones are going to be FitLight. So FitLight is a cool one that is like these little lights that you can put in different places, and you can set up programs where you got to touch the blue, the red, you can use your feet, you can set them on the floor, on the wall. So that's a cool one. And then the one that's more clinical is going to be Dynavision. It's this big board with a bunch of lights on it and buttons on it. So as far as the ones you can use more at home, I would say FitLight is pretty cool. Yeah. The other ones are Synaptech, NSI, Dynavision. Those ones are more you're going to see in like either a physical therapy facility, a functional neuro facility, strength and conditioning facility. Those are more, because they're a lot more expensive and a lot bulkier. But FitLight is pretty cool. And then to finish this off with the most low-hanging fruit, the most obvious thing for preventing any injury is making sure you have adequate sleep. So we know that athletes who don't have enough sleep, or just people who don't have enough sleep, reaction time is decreased, injury risk of any type goes up, and we see that applies to concussion as well. So just making sure adequate sleep. So recap from the top, if you weren't here, check out my stress post. I recently posted a little carousel on stress. I think it's really useful in this time for how we're orienting to everything. Concussion prevention, I am not for banning sports. I am for better recognition, awareness, treatment, reporting, things like that. So helmets don't prevent concussion. This guy did not prevent my concussion, but it prevented me from cracking my face open and having, I think I showed, I don't know if folks saw, there's a little dent right here, you can't really tell, but that was me going face first, and that would have been my whole nose jawline. I probably would have lost a bunch of teeth. That probably would have not been good. So I am grateful for this helmet. Not stoked that I had a concussion, but still. Don't prevent concussion, prevent more severe issues. Neck strength, it's less about the strength, more about the reactivity. We just talked about you can train that reactivity using peripheral vision training, reaction training, things like that. FitLight is a cool sort of at-home one, or one that could be used at home. As far as nutrition goes, omega-3s, vitamin D, curcumin, magnesium, creatine, making sure gut inflammation is in check, and then making sure you guys have adequate sleep. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to message me, to comment on any of my posts.